Hi everyone, welcome to the Incidentally Reliable podcast. Today is a day that we've been looking forward to for quite some time. We have with us today Manoj, Sebastian, one of the foremost SRE leaders in India, having worked in reliability engineering across many large and I'd say high-scale companies like Yahoo, Talisman, Amazon, Flipkart, Intuit, Atlassian, and then most recently he was director of reliability and production engineering at Flipkart. Manoj, nice to have you here.
Thank you, Vishwa. Thanks for having me here. Incidentally reliable is a nice way to start a podcast for reliability.
Happens to be reliable.
Can I ask you why this name, Incidentally Reliable?
I think our focus is more on the people that we have. Just talking about site reliability and people who happen to be reliable. They may have other aspects to their personality, but the most important aspect of them as individuals is that they happen to be reliable people. And therefore we thought, and of course being in the business of incident management, there had to be incident somewhere in the title. So you happen to be incidentally reliable.
Yeah, that's very interesting because if I look back my career, it's again incidentally reliable. It took almost an year for me to really figure out the true potential or the true thing I want to chase. I began my career as a test engineer back in '97 for Zenduty Technologies when the rest of the world was doing Y2K as one of the first product companies in India. And I was a tester back then, not Google. We released our first version of the product. It was an email-based CRM product, and we had our first set of customers in Koramangala, I think.
This was Zenduty Technologies.
Right. So it was Zenduty still. We haven't really made the company called Talisman. So the version 1 of the product was still from Zenduty Technologies, and we used to probably say made in India. The version 1 was sold in India to mostly startups, and some of the banks were new to managing their email-based customer interactions. And I happened to be one of the first support engineers for the product. That was the time I kind of realized that as a tester, there are things beyond the functional attributes of a product which really makes or breaks the product.
Yeah. Actually, before we move into that, would love to understand how. I mean, you worked in a lot of really large companies. How did you choose these companies? Why did you join these specific companies?
You see, I didn't really join these companies, to be frank. My first job at Zenduty Talisman was by chance. It was a time when I was also waiting to join the Y2K bandwagon.
Okay.
And I was kind of waiting for a call from Infosys, and that didn't happen.
Okay.
So I learned AS400 programming. I don't know how many of you had this AS400, but that was one of the IBM mainframe. We used to write programs in COBOL and all that. And Y2K was mostly infamous for those programming languages.
Yep.
And when I was waiting, got this interesting call from a company called Zenduty saying they were building a product in Bangalore. It's built on Microsoft technologies. And until then, I was using only SCO Unix. And it was interesting. So joined the company as a test engineer. Of course, they were paying me well.
Of course.
And I think that was a big turning point. There was a company full of IITians and the first product company in Bangalore. And had a lot of mentors from Microsoft those days.
Interesting.
Okay, the product team, the engineering minds, all were coming from the Microsoft way of building products. So we kind of got into that rhythm from the very beginning, and we built an amazing product. And it was the waterfall days, and I was part of a lot of these discussions which goes till midnight. Where we discuss about functionalities, UXs, doing some of the performance tests, and see how the DB is breaking, where it is scaling.
Was building product more exciting then versus now?
Yeah, I think, just like in our life, you do something and you lose fun of it, right? So you need the next set of challenges.
Okay.
Right. It was a simple desktop-based product. We had this product which was very simple to install, right? You could just take a CD and go to the customer, and the product is installed. And our sales guys were just allowed to sell this product because they can go with a CD give a demo, install it, get the license key, and they're up and running.
Yep.
And that's the kind of user experience those days Telesma was providing to customers. And we used to really focus on that part. But then soon we realized that's not enough to have the increasing needs. So we soon moved into a enterprise offering. And that's where we started seeing a lot of these non-functional or so-called the reliability challenges, what we see. Or rather, I've seen the reliability challenge for the first time.
You mentioned before we started this podcast that Talisma had built its own cloud product, right? Or at least was trying to build a cloud product. How did that go?
Yeah, so I think Talisma still have a cloud product, I think. This was a time when the .com bubble.
Salesforce was already in the market by that time, right?
I think there are a lot of guys at one of time. I think Salesforce, Cana, Pivotal. There are many such vendors. But then this was a time when we run into Citrix. I think those days Citrix had this the desktop virtualization product called Metaframe. Now I don't know what it's called now. So we could really provide a desktop virtualization and Talisma as a product on this technology for remote customers.
Right.
And that was our first crude way of building a SaaS offering for our customers. If you ask me, all the the modern day designs were not there, but we just tried this way of delivering Talisma using Citrix Metaframe, and we had few customers, surprisingly.
Okay. And then moving from Talisma to eventually to Yahoo, how was the culture different between Talisma and Yahoo?
Talisma and Yahoo, I really didn't see much of a cultural difference.
Okay.
Because we were a pretty open culture. One of the things which probably shaped me as a professional from Talisma days were no hierarchy, flat hierarchy kind of an organization where you could have access to the leadership, to the CEO. You can share an idea with the CEO himself.
Yep.
and get his blessing directly. So that kind of gave us the opportunity to ask questions.
Okay.
And challenge things, make better products, so on and so forth.
When you did production engineering in Yahoo, was it also at a much higher scale, and therefore did you also have the same access to, let's say, leadership in Yahoo?
Oh yeah, so David Filo used to be the...
Oh really? Okay.
David Filo used to be the infrastructure head. So all of us used to get our requirements reviewed by him. For example, if there is a new capacity required in one of the region, you'll be running into Filo, and he's as humble and simple as a founder or a technologist, and we could raise your questions. We could have an argument with him, and if you are on the right side, he'll approve it. And Yahoo had this culture of hackathons, and hackathons used to be a time when all of us used to participate, and many Yahoo's products really came through those hackathons, not just the Yahoo products, but our infrastructure tools, some of the Yahoo's proxies, Yahoo's geo load balancers, all these products were done through hackathons.
Got it. Did you do chaos engineering back then in Yahoo?
Chaos engineering was not really coined back then. So Yahoo was mostly a bare metal shop during those days. Visualization was not really there. However, we had some element of this so-called service tiering, now we call.
Okay.
We had a tiering for various Yahoo's offerings, and there used to be a periodic DR certification.
Okay.
Right? We used to certify our various services for its recoverability in case of an issue. But Yahoo was by design built for multi-region.
Got it.
So there were very few services which would go down if there's an outage in a particular region. Yahoo was all around the world, right? So it was by design, it was supposed to withstand one of outage in one of the region. And that's how the SRE team those days would take care of the capacity planning for every service. Would get capacity in A, B, C regions, and that's how the deployment used to happen. That's how the monitoring used to happen. That's how the changes used to happen. So it was pretty much built that way. But still, we managed to get some of the services down globally.
This was, I think, the time when you were moving from bare metal to sort of fully cloud-driven organizations, Amazon, Intuit, Flipkart, Atlassian. While we go into those companies, this is post 2014, right? How has reliability engineering changed since since the 2000s.
Yeah. So if I kind of think back, with the virtualization, containerization, and now even the serverless architectures, you kind of removed a lot of context otherwise a developer needed to get their code running. And it also reduced the overhead on the operations team. Right? Back then when you had all these bare metals, it was imperative that you need to have an army of operators to install the operating system all the way to keep it up and running. But with the invention of the virtualization, or rather the adoption of virtualization, the designs are moving mostly into design out for failures. It doesn't matter, okay, one of my VM goes down, it doesn't matter. That kind of designs reduced the focus on the operating engineers or the operations team. And when we were in Pi, my second startup, we were one of the first beta customers of Amazon. It was even before coined the EC2. It was called something else, and we were the beta customers of AWS. And it was free for us, obviously, because we were beta testers. And we have seen some of the outages in AWS, which wiped out our entire stack. Of course, we were also in beta, so it was not a big issue. But that kind of made us to engineer the entire stack, or rather the composable configurations where we can rebuild everything from scratch with a script. We're using Puppet kind of orchestration technologies to do that. But definitely that kind of reduced the amount of physical labor of ops engineers to literally go and install operating systems and all that. We kind of engineerize a lot of that. That is where the thinking started changing, that can the developer run what they build?
Yep.
Right? Do we really need a operations engineer? So many companies since then kind of stopped investing into the traditional operations engineers. And companies, or rather the startups, came up, I think since 2005, or I would say, I think
around the time in SRE.
Around I think 2010, I would say. Yep. Or rather the time when AWS became much more of the first choice of technology for people to use. It was mostly you build it, you run it.
Yep.
Right? And then wondering, hey, what these ops engineers do, right? And still not much to talk about SRE. And then the SRE terminology was kind of coined by only in Google. Not many companies really adopted it. And the new set of products coming to the market, they were mostly the new design, right? There were less of monoliths. We had this microservices and the service one architecture. It kind of helped people to own certain functionalities independently, and it can have its own reliability and recovery and so on and so forth. That's where companies have seen the problems, right? When you have the microservice proliferation, the dependencies, scalabilities, interoperabilities, and all the illities. And then this entire SRE, the SRE need starts surfacing again, right? So we got rid of the operations engineering paradigm, started to wonder how do we make services reliable.
There's one thing that a lot of our listeners would want to hear about from you specifically, having set up so many SRE teams in many companies. At what stage do you set up an SRE practice, and how do you go about with it?
Yeah. See, mostly when a company reaches a certain scale, typically a startup, when the startup started to see success, and they have amassed a certain number of customers, then reliability is something become a table stake for the company. That is when typically companies start thinking about reliability engineering or SREs and so on and so forth. In a startup world, which I worked, like the Pi I was talking about, we built our first SRE team maybe 2 years down the line.
Okay.
When we are getting ready for our first public beta,
First public beta. Okay.
Yeah, that is the time we were kind of investing into SREs and start growing.
You mean you had significant revenues at that time?
No, we didn't have revenue at that point of time, but it was a startup and mostly running as a public beta.
Okay.
Right, it was more of a shaping it up for the potential acquiring companies to see it as a reliable product for them to monetize at some point of time in their future.
So would you advocate for SRE from day one, if you are funded, let's say, if you're a company that's trying to build a high quality product, even in beta, do you incorporate SRE or start building out the SRE from day one, or maybe if you reach a certain scale is when you should start thinking about
the reliability. A reliability team may not be viable at that point of time, but the reliability concepts, reliability practices, always required. And it may not be a full-fledged reliability team at that point of time, but there could be someone they could at least mentor them or supervise them to make sure that some of the design goes in the right direction. And if the startup one of the founder is well versed with the reliability practices, then I think that is good enough.
Yep. Got it. And how would you set up so if let's say even if you reach at a certain stage, right? If you're a CTO or maybe a VP of engineering in a company trying to set up an SRE practice, how would you go about hiring the right team? What do you look when you hire people for reliability engineering?
Yeah, it's a good question. So SREs don't really come from the campus. You become an SRE after going through a certain amount of experience.
Agree. Yeah.
And you were a developer some point of time. You written code, you deployed it, you experienced what it means to make mistakes and be reliable. So if you want to influence an organization with the reliability practices, then SRE should be able to share their experiences. And most of the time, an SRE will be talking to an architect or even a CTO. A fresher from the campus probably won't be having all the context to do that. So we usually look for some of the seasoned SREs as a bootstrapping team. Right? They come, they can look at what's going on and assess the situation and make a proposal which can be related by the senior leadership of the organization. And then as we get into the execution, we start hiring the next layer of engineers who can really build and implement the proposal we are actually making.
Got it. And if let's say someone is an engineer, maybe a senior engineer, but wants to specifically get into the reliability role or resilience engineering in general, right, within the same company, how would they go about getting into that team?
Yeah. So everyone is an engineer, and you start writing code. I think coding is the table stake, right? You bring and you start doing designs. So you can code, you can design, and you start to understand the systems, especially how the distributed systems fail, and some of the design patterns there, and someone who starts showing inclination towards problems, troubleshooting,
okay,
and looking at the problems at a larger level,
okay,
right, beyond their small scope of work. That's when we can start spotting some of the potential SREs.
Okay,
right, and if they want to build a career in SRE, we start grooming them with some of the SRE crafts. We call them SRE crafts.
This is internally basically creating your SRE.
Correct.
It's with lateral hires.
Yeah. So whichever organization we find talents, or when we hire some lateral hires, we look at this. We interview something called SRE craft. So in that we look for what is their how do they design for reliability, even if they're not done that before from a very reliability point of view, but at least what is their instincts about reliability.
Okay.
So we look at some of the designs from a pure reliability point of view, right? See, are they looking at rate limiting? Are they looking at failback? So we look at some of these aspects as engineers, and if they are really thinking about that, then there's a good sign that they can be groomed into a good SRE.
In terms of incident management of all the companies that you worked in, Amazon apparently has a very advanced IAM process. Could you maybe talk a little bit about what Amazon did right? How did they end up with that kind of an incident management process?
Yeah, I'm sure again anyone who follows Amazon, you must have read about their 14 leadership principles, and one among them is vocally self-critical. I think they encourage people to be vocally self-critical, and an incident is a time you can really criticize yourself vocally, and they had this amazing process of correction of errors. I think you can Google. I think there are plenty of articles there. And the company as a culture, they encourage teams to write this RCs, or they call it as correction of errors there. I don't know what they call now, but it used to be called correction of errors back then. And they had in fact built a nice application to track these RCAs. And RCAs always should come with a lot of data and action items. And these RCAs will be presented to the BU leader. So as an engineer, you get visibility to the engineering leader or engineering head of the BU. Imagine you are presenting an RCA to head of AWS engineering, right? So people really spend time to analyze, because you could get any kind of questions. So they do analysis of the problem, pull out the data, have action items, and these action items get tracked with certain ETAs, and the ETAs are always followed up. And if you're not meeting the ETAs for the action items, then that again get bubbled up in your engineering excellence dashboard. So the entire ecosystem was built so that no such incidents get escaped, or action items don't fall through the cracks. Right? Many companies we know we do RCAs. When the incident is in the heat of its moment, we do RCAs. Everyone feel good about the RCAs, but the action items usually take a back seat.
Yep.
There are these systems built in place so that the action items are followed through until it is implemented. And that is one thing I liked about Amazon. And the biggest incentive for the engineers to do these RCAs was that it used to be even considered in their performance reviews and promotions that an engineer who write, or rather, I would say write, I think, on great RCAs, really considered as, it's a additional point for their performance or their promotion packet.
How should engineering leaders in any organization look at empowering the SRE teams to drive change and drive change fast?
It is not just SREs. SRE is an enabler,
yep.
Right? So this is another misconception I would like to touch upon. SREs alone can't bring in the change.
Yep.
SREs are enablers, right? So the SREs are enabling or helping the engineering teams, the developers, to be reliable. So SREs bring in the wealth of experience from their past or the present roles, or working with the different teams in the same organization. They learn from the various problems. So they bring in all this experience back into teams and help them to be reliable. It could be through adoption of certain platforms or doing certain kind of non-functional testing. It could be multifolded, right? All the possible reliability patterns in front of these teams, they can be leveraged with the help of the SREs. And SREs in some organizations, they create a lot of platforms that can be widely used. To give an example, we have created chaos platforms so that all teams can automatically get a bunch of chaos tests without even having to write a single code.
Yep.
So all they have to do is just use them and see how quickly they can recover, right? So SREs are just to enable the teams. The empowerment has to come from top, right? There has to be a drive for becoming reliable, and there has to be data bubbled up to the leadership team so that they can keep on investing into the reliability initiatives. So SREs enable, they bring data. They reflect upon how the organization is doing and what is the cost of reliability to the organization.
Got it. I was curious, is the reliability leadership role tougher in an e-commerce setting versus a SaaS setting? So SaaS has uniform traffic daily. In e-commerce, you're preparing for like a 10x plus traffic, right? So you need to plan for that well in advance. Does it make a job a little different?
Well, you as an SRE team, they always looking for keeping the site ready. Definitely preparing for a peak business day is different, right? Because you can't make a error there. To give you an example, I used to work for a company where they used to do this tax filing for US. And the last day of tax filing, there will be huge traffic. And the US won't change the last tax filing day.
Yeah, they won't, not there in India, right?
And if you're down, then they'll probably go to another vendor and get the tax file and use it out. On the other hand, in an e-commerce site, if you are fighting on the price, and even if you go down for 1 hour, since the price was revealed, customers come back and they still buy. So what is the cost of reliability?
Yeah.
Right. So it's all depends upon the cost of reliability. Right. It is much difficult to do reliability for a critical event, because it's also easy in a way because you have all the hands on the deck during that point of time.
Yep.
On the other hand, when you have some of these SaaS products where you have some of these 24/7 operation, and it's running it's running 365 days of an year, but still there are certain key events. For example, if you have an accounting software as a SaaS product,
the certain days of the year,
there will be like the month end, there could be a month end processing. Correct. There could be payroll processing, right? So all these things can't have an outage.
Yeah.
Right. We don't want employees' salaries to be delayed, right?
How did you deal with? I mean, last couple of years you've had leadership positions. How did you deal with any unexpected outage that may have had a small business impact? How do you mentally deal with that?
See, I don't know. Can use this kind of follow. Shit happens, right?
Shit happens. Go for it. Shit does happen.
It's all about how do we respond to that, right? Everything fails. I don't think we can build anything which is not going to fail. But when you have a team, typically very seasoned in managing such big failures, have the experience. The difference is how do you deal that failure? How do you recover? How do you manage customers? Many times customers are okay with the outage as long as they've been informed. Right? Even customers are not really expecting you to be up all the time. So it is not just about you bring the system back up, but also how do we communicate your stakeholders, communicate with your customers, communicate with your say CX team, your customer care team.
Yep.
Right? So typically some of these things goes down. There could be a huge call volume coming into your call center. The teacher will be going berserk. Right? So you have various levers for you to control the things which are basically not in your control. While your SRE focusing on bringing the system back up and running, right? You also can leverage many other stakeholders within the organization to manage all that goes around, and that kind of controls all the tension, because no C position leaders want to see their system down, right? So you need to keep communicating with the leadership, communicating with customers. So there's a lot happening apart from fixing the real technical issue. So that part is the most taxing one.
Yeah.
Right. So you need to succinctly communicate the problem, the path to fix it, while you also figure out how do we fix it and how do we recover it and what are the repercussions or ramifications of this particular problem, right? Yeah. So it requires experience. The more you go through these situations, and the more you handle it, it comes in. You become better. SRE
seems to be one of the toughest engineering roles out there. It also shows in the pay, right? SRE engineers or reliability engineers in general have a higher pay than maybe other engineers in the same team. How do you manage that work-life balance, and especially if you're, let's say, in a fast-growing company and you're constantly scaling, you're constantly trying to look at scenarios or possible scenarios of downtime. How do you sort of juggle that work-life balance in such a fast-paced environment, especially if you're a reliability engineer?
The answer is SRE. So when we are not SREs, we are just service engineers or ops engineers in the past. Right? This was a daily affair. Right? The same systems keep failing. You kind of wake up into the same day. We used to call the Groundhog Day movie, right? You wake up into the same day. I don't know.
Same thing happens over and over again.
Over and over again, right? But SREs are meant to reverse that trend. That's why typically we attack it in 3 or 4 pillars. To me, I look at it in 4 different quadrants. The first one is having incident management. Really helps you to have a one-stop shop for everything which is going wrong. So if SREs are trying to handle incident management and recovery and education, and all, this is not going to scale. So we usually keep a dedicated team. They are the place to go if there's an incident, and they kind of orchestrate everything around it. And SREs then focus on making sure that the engineering team is building the right reliability capabilities into the product. They've been testing all the required and non-functional attributes of the product, so on and so forth. And finally, they also make sure that there is enough observability built into the product so that when something goes wrong, we can quickly identify the issue and fix them, so that you don't have to do witch hunting in terms of what's gone wrong. And the third part, the last part is resilience. Right? So SREs really focus on making sure the teams are adopting some amount of resilience cadence. We call it resilience experiments, and keep on certifying themselves, for some untoward event, so that when something goes wrong, they know how to recover it quickly. When I get a call in the middle of the night that something is down, we have a recipe in place to recover it, and then maybe the next day you look at what really happened, and that's only way we can sustain a team. Otherwise, people get burnt out.
Got it.
So we really focus on these aspects, so that there is some amount of separation of concerns within reliability engineering team itself.
Reliability engineering teams also has a very big impact on the business, right? And business projections as well. You mentioned that in a lot of organizations you have annual business plans where, if let's say that the business teams are projecting to do business maybe let's say 2x, 3x in the next year, what is the role of a reliability leader in terms of business planning?
Okay. Usually the reliability engineers don't get into the business planning.
Leader,
the reliability leaders, they are part of the overall annual planning, and the sense coming in terms of where the business want to head the next year, and that get converted into the OKRs of every organization, and that also maps to how do we scale capacity and how much budget we have available for what we want to do. And the business always want to do more. There has to be a discussion and trade-offs to maximize what the business want to achieve with the resources we have.
Okay.
And if there is a demand which we need to fulfill, that actually goes to the leadership to get additional budgets. Because as you know, no company can have a plan written on the 1st of January and stick to that till end of the year. Because plans do change. The business, the market conditions will ask you to do things in a different way. So a lot of internal prioritization trade-offs takes place to support some of these things. So that's where the reliability leadership is constantly involved with the engineering product leadership to make sure that these changes are not impacting the overall reliability, availability, performance, and we can provide capacity for some of those demands.
Did you ever feel when, let's say, the business wants to do more and you came back and said that maybe we can do a percentage of that, we can't do as much or we can't handle as much? Did you ever get a feeling that maybe reliability or engineering has limitation, or maybe just holding the business back? Has it ever occurred?
It is very easy to say that we can do all the trade-offs, but there are situations where we have to just do it. I'm sure COVID taught us some hard lessons, right? So you have to implement something for COVID response, or it's a flood situation, or there was a demonetization. Some companies started this buy now pay later, right? So do you get those constructs tested overnight? No, it's a leap of faith.
Okay.
Right? And you start learning quickly and course correcting and continuously improving there. So there are a lot of planning goes in advance wherever we can, but be flexible enough to respond to such interesting market dynamics, and then have the understanding of your systems to see how can we pull off such demands with the resources we have. And there's always in a large organization, there's always some surplus capacity. You can always optimize.
How did you present risk in the operations? I mean, again, if leadership wants to, or if business wants to scale or go in a certain direction, how do you measure the risk in the technology, the risk in operations in general?
See, there's so many risks, right? From a reliability point of view, the reliability point of view, the risk can be. I'll talk about most of the risk which is coming in or away from that context, right? Say, for example, preparing for a peak business event. What if AWS East or West goes down?
Correct.
Right. So those kind of risk we write down, and we talk about the mitigation plans, and talk about the cost of those mitigations. And then we decide if that happens, what would be the response, right? If you want to keep active setup in 2 regions, it may have a cost. Versus you take 4 hours of outage and recover manually, right? So risk and mitigations are usually done with a lot of cost in a context. Right? Can the business afford such kind of a risk? And if at all they can't afford, then what is the cost? And the cost has to be baked into the mitigation plan.
Got it. How did you look at training the engineering team, not specifically the SRE, training the entire engineering team on the key business metrics that matter to the business while they're building whatever services that they're building, right?
I hope every company, they're building services, they have their product matrices, right? It could be adoption, it could be retention, it could be monetization. Right? Without these metrics, I don't think any companies these days build products. If not, I think that they should do it quickly. And any engineering team who's on the right direction, they are aware of these matrices, and they should know how they're impacting these matrices. Okay. Sometimes it could be directly, could be indirectly too. And communicating that top down is an important responsibility of leaders. They keep on reflecting on how are we doing on our key business matrices as an organization.
You mentioned that key business metrics translate into product metrics as well, right?
Right.
Engineers need to internalize the product metrics and the minimum service availability that is expected of all of their services, right? Do engineers need to understand a lot more about how the business works, the finances, how customers, the end users are actually interacting with the product? How exactly is the company making money? Do you think engineers need to understand the business to take reliability seriously, or the reliability of what they are building seriously?
It is not just for the reliability aspects. I think it is important to know that what is the business they are building. To give you an example, say you have you're building an application or a simple e-commerce application, and you have a bunch of listings. You show some merchandise content. You show recommendations. You need to know where the revenue is coming from, right? And you need to know how your service is powering those metrics. Right. So that level of mapping should happen from top to bottom. So typically the way we do is that you have this level 0 metric, could be very few. Then you have L1, L2s. So maybe as an engineer, I'll be working on the L2 metric. I'll be impacting L2 metric. But you should know that, I'm impacting this L2 metric, that is in turn impacting the L1s and L0s. To give you an example, I am showing, let's say you are showing an advertisement in your application. I should be, as an engineer, I should know that how many ads are served and displayed, right? And that metric impacts my revenue. Correct. So my L2 is the number of ads served is impacting my L0, L1, which is my revenue. So that level of clarity should be provided to engineers, and we should be running your weekly OPEX or engineering excellence with such metrics in front of you. And you can easily correlate that, okay, there was a outage in service A, which is an ad serving service, for 5 minutes, and correspondingly there's a drop in revenue. Yeah. So that kind of again gives a full picture to engineers, and then they know why I should be baking in reliability or resilience to my services, so that even if there is a small blip, it doesn't really impact my top matrices.
We spoke a lot about leadership and about people and processes. I think One thing that I want to chat with you about is tooling. Right, you built a lot of the tooling in-house, and of course you brought in a lot of external tooling wherever you went. Where do you see how do you see the observability landscape evolving in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think I want to ask you. Observability as a term which is kind of coined, I think, last 5-6 years, right? It's become very popular.
It's a combination of everything.
And we're all doing monitoring in the past.
Exactly.
Right? For monitoring, and everyone is so used to matrices. Then came this, the microservices world, and we want to know what's happening between, right? Metrics alone don't do things. People started creating more and more matrices and more tags and dimensions, which causes cardinality problems. And we realized we need to separate some of these things and bring in a new way of dealing this metrics, traces, logs, and so on and so forth. And the unified view, so-called observability, where we know why something is failing and not about what is happening. The challenge with such observability tool in the current world is that observability is a data problem. The more data, most of the tools, they are focused on collecting more and more signals.
Yeah.
And more signals, and if you look at the pricing of many of these tools, they are priced on the data ingestion, right? Yeah. They price based on ingestion. And if you look at it, you don't really look at all the data all the time. You should look at when something is wrong.
Correct.
So as you know, that 80-20 principle, right? There are vital few and trivial many. And that also causes two problems. One is the amount of data or signals coming. Tools can't really scale to some of the application hierarchy, because they create a lot more data than the application can render, right? So I can see that there's a new trend which is happening. They're trying to reduce the amount of data or the signals to get the insight what we really need. Right? Instead of sending a lot of data to your storage and then you do all the processing to figure out what is wrong, you try to bring in more intelligence at the collection side, at your pipeline, and then you store as less as possible at your storage side, and then you do run rules. And I think with the AI coming into a picture, I think soon that will also become much easier, because now you can look at observability beyond this metrics, traces, and logs.
Yeah.
You can start looking at events too, right? Just by looking at the number of all the alerts we feed into the observability system, maybe in the future with AI, with enough past information, hey, this is going to break in some time.
Yeah.
Right? So all the cell 3 alerts coming into your system can probably tell you that, okay, there is something going to improve. Or you can predict that this is slowing down. So observability soon to become more of a event consuming system. Of course, metric is one of the signal or an event, or logs and so forth. And that helps the engineering teams to catch issues earlier, so that it happens. And also debug and take to the point where the problem is happening, right? And which will help everyone to reduce the overall cost of owning these observability systems. I don't want to name a company, but I'm sure you would have read this 65 million bill somebody paid to one of the company recently.
Yeah,
right? Right? I think that doesn't make sense, right? I think there's something fundamentally wrong when somebody is spending $65 million for observability. That is the biggest problem with observability.
Is this way too much data being ingested without any significant?
And that's not, and these tools don't scale. They can't render. I've seen, I don't want to name any vendor, but I see them struggling with the amount of data. They can't render. It doesn't scale with so many number of concurrent users. Right? There are, when you're working in a company which is waiting for a peak business day, and when the days just cut over, there is a lot of anxiety among developers to go and see how the metrics are looking.
Yep.
There's going to be a sudden spike of refresh happening to your metric dashboard by every single developer in the organization. Can you scale that kind of time? Right? Do you need such an extensive observability tool for that? Right. So one of the approach I take in that field is typically have more of a purpose-driven tool. Don't have a single silver bullet to solve all the problems. Break them down. Right? You can have a historics dashboard which can tell you like at a millisecond level what is going on. And then maybe a 1 minute latent Gordon signals coming in. And then maybe a 1 to 2 minute latent, your logs coming in, or even logs which are coming at a very low latency, but it's not saved for a long time. So a lot of those purpose-built, tiered tooling kind of works at scale in observability. Anybody say, hey, this tool will solve everything for you? I can always doubt their claims.
You doubt if they can.
Their claims, yeah.
There is one thing that a lot of maybe we did a little bit of research on what kind of questions are being asked in SRE forums, right? Is there a demand for SREs? What is the demand for SRE? Do you think SRE as an occupation or SRE as a role is going to stay relevant?
Absolutely, because the true SREs are always difficult to find. I think in the last 2 years, I would have interviewed hundreds of engineers, but found only a handful of SREs.
Yeah.
We find a lot of DevOps. So this is another challenge we end up facing. We find a lot of ops engineers. We find DevOps engineers. SREs, the true SREs, or the difference between an SRE versus a ops engineer is probably misunderstood by many in the industry. So the true SRE is
it the difference between Holmes and Watson?
Yeah. So in fact, we had I had a slide deck in I think in my previous roles. I start with this slide. What is DevOps versus ops versus SRE versus support engineering. So to get everyone clear on what what it is, right? So that everyone is on the same understanding. And one of the way of making everyone to understand what are the differences, focusing them on what do they focus on, the metric which are impacting. For example, if you look at a DevOps engineer, right? What is the metric they should be impacting, right? So as a DevOps engineer, I'm supposed to improve the deployment frequency.
Yep.
If I'm doing my job right, then I'm improving that deployment frequency in the company. Right? I can also look at the failure rates, right? Number of deployment failures. Right? These are my metric. I'm moving. Very clear. Right? As an SRE, I'm not really focused on improving that metric. Of course, I'm leveraging my DevOps tooling. But what I am moving is my SLOs, SLIs, golden signals, error budgets. So this is what SRE really tied upon. Right? And what about ops engineer? The typical operations engineers we deal with, right? What do they get measured upon? They are there living and dying for uptimes. They're always there to keep the system up and running. They will be measured on the TTD, TTRs, and so on and so forth. When something going down, they're just there to get it up and running. And as a product support engineer, because there are PSCs in some of these organizations, they take care of the internal platforms and products. They're typically focused on the resolutions of issues and SLAs around that. So this way, we can have a clear understanding of what is SREs delivering in organization. With that, we also get into something called the RASI model, right? Responsibility, accountability model. What are they responsible for? What are they accountable for? And then we talk about how do we engage to an engineering team in their current stage of journey. And there we talk about something called sharing the pain. Because every team has a pain of reliability issues. And SREs don't shy away from joining the pain, sharing the pain. Because one of the things nobody likes is, I don't want you to be sounding as an advisor. Don't give me GAN. Right? I want you to improve something for me. So then we work on an SRE engagement model with the team, given the situation they are in, and help come up with some of those stories which going to be improving the reliability issues which they have in a systemic way. And the SREs become part of their sprints.
Should SREs speak to end users or customers? Do you think that'd be good for the product or the service or the business in general?
Yeah, so SRE's customer, who is SRE's customer?
No,
developers.
I'm saying, so no, in this case I'm saying should SREs talk to the end users? So to actually see how they're using it, what actually matters to them. I mean, of course, PMs do that, customer success does that, support teams do that, they have that information, but should the SRE teams directly talk to customers?
Directly talking to a customer during an issue may not be the right thing to do. But then, to me, in general, every engineer should spend some time with the customers, right? This is one of the practice we used to do as a startup. We used to put all our developers with the support engineers for a week. So they know, they get a first-hand experience of how the customers are responding to the problem, what they're facing, and how the support engineer is responding to it. And with 1 week in the support roles, they'll come back with a lot of improvements to the product.
Okay.
And I've seen, that paying huge dividends. And personally speaking, a lot of my customer empathy developed when I was working as a support engineer, right? And then I was a product implementation specialist, and those interactions really opened up a lot of possibilities which I never thought about. It helps you to improve your empathy towards customers, and that comes back into your designs, right? When just think about, right? You have a SaaS solution, and you have a admin at the customer end, and something goes wrong, and he or she has no idea, right, what's happening, and they have to pick up the phone and call somebody or make a support request. But if you know what that particular end user is going through, then probably you will bake in a lot of messaging, or could be some simple banner going to the admin saying that there's something wrong, as simple as that. So there has to be some amount of interaction with customers. It would be simply follow the customer. Many companies do that. They call it as follow the customers.
Do you think when you look at now India specifically, right, product companies, SaaS companies, or any engineering team for that matter, do you see that our engineers don't really speak to customers? They lack a certain bit of empathy, and how do Indian tech companies build a good culture of reliability internally?
I think we do a lot, right? If I look at some of the best breed product in India, I can see that they're really thinking about the customer empathy, right? So to give an example, I see some of these food delivery apps giving a rain alert in the application. Right. It is not really required, but it basically sets everyone's nerve cool, right? I'm sure that they must be riding with one of the delivery boy in a rain, so they know what it really means, right? So that kind of a follow the customer is a great vehicle for bringing in customer empathy. And I think doing it, if any company not doing it, I think encourage them to follow the customers, right? When I remember Flipkart, I remember founders do delivery on a Big Billion Day. I'm sure you have seen the newspapers, right? So they know what it means to go park a small scooter in a small gully and find out the address which you think it is very easy to find. Not the case in India, right?
Even I think DoorDash, right? DoorDash has this culture where their engineers are sent to they do delivery work every once in a while as well. Swiggy founders used to deliver, I remember. Zomato also does that,
So that is, follow the customer is a very common practice now. And I've seen certain companies, they do it as an innovation vehicle to just go sit to the customer for a day and observe what they're doing. And that probably gives them more ideas to add a new feature or innovate something. And many products come out of that interaction, especially in the space of small and medium businesses. Like just go look at a bakery nearby, and they are doing how do they do the accounting, right? What kind of automation they can do? You get a lot of ideas on how to build a product. So similarly, if you are building a monitoring product, you should do some of these interactions to see what they go through, right? When an incident happens, right? What really helps them, right? To give an example, like a simple ACK feature, right, in your push notification saves a lot of pain for a on-call engineer.
Including ourselves. We use it ourselves. Right. How do you project reliability to your customers? I mean, I feel that SREs or reliability team pretty much sort of works in the shadows, right? How do you customers know that you haven't gone down, but how do you, as a company, project that you're a very solid, reliable engineering team? Have you thought about that? I mean, you do a lot of that when you're posting your JDs, right, for your team. But how do you project that? You know what, we are reliable, and this is the proof, or this is how you know that we are reliable.
Yeah, I don't think any company really talk about we are reliable, but they talk about that through some of the SLAs they commit to the customers.
Yeah.
Right, and also being transparent about what's happening. So recently I was talking to somebody and they're talking about this watermelon effect. So you show the watermelon from outside looks like green and inside it's all red, right? on the reverse way, right? You look everything inside is everything is red, but outside is green. So it's that way. With the customers, a lot of our customers knows that these are internet. There's going to be failures. There's going to be issues, but the transparency is what they look at. So communication is communicating or over communicating through email, verbally, and also smart communication through all the other means we have, right? Like push notifications or slide bubbles and all that you do in our UX. Really save you. I'll give you another example. One of the product I worked on, they were into tax filing, and on the last day of tax filing, there was a increase in payment failure. And without payment, if you allow the customer to file, then you lose revenue, right? And the flow was that okay, you first authenticate the payment at the beginning, and we then continue with the filing. But then we realized that this tax filing is a slightly time-consuming process. It may take like 10, 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes, 1 hour, most of the cases. So even if the payment authentication fails at the beginning, you can retry the time he submits it.
Yeah.
By the time, hopefully the gateway would have recovered.
Yeah.
So this, the resilience you build at the UX level, right? Really, pays a huge dividend. And customers also like, this company had a problem, but he's not blocking me. He is allowing me to continue. Right? So this is the kind of the user experience we can provide. So reliability often looked at as a back-end thing.
Yeah.
But reliability is also at the front end. In fact, the customers see your reliability from the front end.
Exactly.
So the UX plays a huge role in the customer
projecting
experience, reliability, and you must design out the UX in a way that there are very few failed customer interactions, and even if there's a failure, there is a plan B. Can we route the flow into another page or another screen without breaking their objective, and then come back to the original intent you had with them, right? And so this is something this is something you should think about as you build your UX.
So I think towards the end, our listeners would love to learn or love to hear a little couple of war room stories from you. You can pick and choose. Of course, you don't need to name names, but some of your best war room moments.
Yeah, I think war room stories are always fun when you look back now. If you ask me to pick one, I wouldn't really name anyone. One of them I just mentioned about this payment gateway failures are very common in any of this last minute, right? One of the incidents was that one of the peak business day, the sale opening, we were overwhelmed with the number of requests. So we probably got 4x of our originally forecasted.
And you had over-provisioned as well. We had over-provisioned 2x.
We over-provisioned 2x, but we got almost 4x. And what do? Sometimes systems will surprise you that it actually can go to 3x. but then that kind of creates unknown repercussion to some other systems.
Correct.
Right? It is not really safe to allow such incidental reliability for a long time. Right? You should have a controllable reliability. Right?
Correct.
We luckily we had practiced a lot of and this is sale opening, and we have the whole war room looking at, and suddenly we see 0 orders coming in, and there's panic.
Yeah.
Right. And especially when you have a lot of people watching you, then so many ideas going, but then in a corner the core team sits and start pulling the levers. Right. So shut this down.
Yeah.
And divert traffic to another area where they can still have some experience about what is going on.
Yep.
So the overall the UX design and using all the levers where we could use to reduce the pressure to certain areas which was causing this pain. And then we drained that traffic, and then the things are coming back, properly. If you want to, the biggest learning there was that we had practiced everything, right? This is a good story, right? So we had practiced everything, what could go wrong, but we never expected this forex traffic coming in. We knew that, okay, something in a steady state, something goes wrong, how to recover, but we never expected to have this forex traffic coming in, and of course there was an interruption for 30 minutes.
Yep.
But then,
but how come business did not forecast 4x? Business was forecasting X. You had provision for 2x, and 4x showed up. How did business miss that?
See, that is that is something, again, we should all be humble enough to understand the user behavior, right?
Yeah.
Our assumptions will totally go wrong, right? The Murphy's law.
Yeah.
Right. So assumptions totally go wrong. Customers would want something else, right? When in a country like us where we are very price sensitive, and they see that something is available at a
they just
right?
show up. Yeah.
They just show up. So you can't help it. I'm sure you see that in many places. So your assumptions will really go wrong, and be ready to be proven wrong every time when you run some of these things. And sometimes it will surprise you pleasantly.
Yeah.
And sometimes it will be unpleasant. And be bold enough to be ready with your levers to control that situation.
I mean, 4x of expected traffic is a good problem to have.
Yeah, but it doesn't help, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have, this is something which we should all remember, that it's all about delivering something reliably than delivering, everything unreliably, right? Something you deliver reliably. Yeah, there is no infinite capacity with anyone.
How do you celebrate a resolution of a major incident? How do you unwind?
Okay, maybe I should take an example of such an incident, right? So I always talk about this in many places, that during my Yahoo days, my team used to manage Yahoo's login, and the deployments used to happen from India because that's the off-peak time, and we brought down Yahoo's login worldwide. So anybody who worked on ELBs know that you take a machine off the rotation, and then you deploy, and then you deploy, but you forgot to bring it back. So we are down for I think 15-20 minutes worldwide. Yahoo login was down. And
did it make it to the news?
I don't remember that. It's been a while ago. Definitely, it was, I think, that point of time, because Yahoo was still popular that point of time. And of course, it wasn't a pleasant thing for me, because it had gone to the CEO. Of course, an RCA written, and it was reviewed by every single person. And one thing about writing RCA is that when you are at the responsibility side of an incident, you get a lot of motherhood statements.
Yep.
Right. You should do that, and you should do this. Right. And one of the recommendation, or one of the requirement came from one of the leader, was that we need the revenue impact. How much revenue was impacted because of the outage. And I was like, very scared. Right?
Yep.
Yahoo's such a company, millions get impacted because of an outage.
Yep.
So I was chasing one of the analytics team guy to get the number. So they take time. And those days we didn't have all this, quick analytics kind of thing. So I raised the ticket, and I waited for my luck for 1 week. And I received a mail after a week saying that during this time we had a slight increase in revenue. I was like, what the heck? Okay. Apparently, what happened is, when Yahoo's login is down, we had a redirect to the homepage.
Okay.
And homepage we show more ads.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
So that is one funny story, about incidents and the revenue impact. But yeah, you can't deploy such levers to increase your revenue. But sometimes, these incidents really surprise you in a different way.
Got it. Do you switch off after a major incident? How do you get back to your normal state of mind?
So I think you talked about this work-life balance at some point of time, right?
Yeah.
This is one thing in my style of work-life balance is I want to switch off when I want to switch off. So to me, the work-life balance is I should be able to make myself available for work when the work needs me, and I should be able to make myself available to only to my life when that needs me for 2 weeks. I should be able to take 2 weeks leave if I need and switch off. So I kind of build my teams in a way I can be switched off for 2 weeks if need be. The same way I prepare my family that this is the peak season or some war room or a festival sale going on, so I won't be available for all the daily chores at home.
Okay.
Right. So that way it works for everyone, because setting expectations is very important with family too, because a lot of sacrifice because you work in the middle of the night, and then of course you do party. We party hard.
Yeah.
We always believe in work hard and party harder. And I think that is a time we kind of the true RCAs and the true feedback comes when you really unwind outside office. So that's another important aspect of bonding teams, building the camaraderie, and also hearing the real feedback from your team. How do they feel in a very candid environment? So, which is very important.
How do you build that? So as a manager, as a leader, how do you build that security cover for your team to work effectively during a major incident and not feel like they're under pressure or they'll be blamed for something? How do you build that trust?
It may sound very cliche, but I think you would have heard this Abdul Kalam story, right? That you always represent, you always be there in the front when there's a problem, right? You don't put your engineers in front when something is wrong. So you own all the failures and make them celebrate, the wins.
Do you celebrate failures?
Of course. So RCA is a time when we celebrate failures, that we learned a lot.
Okay.
Right? If you have not made a mistake, then you not learned. So one of my interview questions to many of the SREs, if you are interviewed by me, then I would ask this question to you. Tell me one mess up you made in your career.
Okay.
If you're not done any such mess up, then probably you didn't really tried enough.
Yeah.
Somebody is repeating the same mistake again and again, something wrong.
Yeah.
But we have to give a cover for failures. Encourage trying things, but fail fast. Right. So we make sure that if somebody failed, then don't really justify the failure. Right. Often, vocally self-critical, and encourage a questioning culture in the team. So one of the things which I encourage my team is that you can ask any question. You can question anything. So when you bring in a design to the table, be ready to get questioned. Don't expect any soft questions there. And that kind of, over a period of time, team kind of develop that culture of taking questions and always enjoy those questioning so that they can solidify their designs, their thought process, all that. And in some new companies, the culture is not there. We have a bit of a challenge, but then we tend to improve that over a period of time by demonstrating the value of asking questions and being uncomfortable with questions and then become comfortable with the questions.
Awesome. So thank you, Manoj, for making time for us today. I know there's so many, there are hundreds of stories that we can talk about in the future, and hopefully, as the audience grows, they'll also have a lot more questions around reliability engineering, around leadership in general, and we'd love to have you sometime in the future as well.
Sure, Vishwa. Thank you for having me here. It is a pleasure talking to you and the Zenduty team. I know these stories are never-ending stories. We can continue talking for maybe a day or maybe multiple days. So I think we'll definitely catch up some other moment and continue this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much.